All right, we are going to start today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Diane Liddell. I helped put this program together. We're very excited to have these groups together, the Combat Research Group and the Engineering College of Engineering here. Just a few things to open up. Welcome. Today's event will be recorded, and that recording will be available early next week. Please use the question function throughout the day. We will have two sessions for questions at the end of each session, so session 1 and session 2. We'll look through your questions. We'll try to get to most of them. Here we have a link to the agenda. I know some people can't be on for the full 2 hours, so if you see something on the agenda and you'd like to pop back in, all the times are there, and we'll try to stick to the schedule. If you have any technical difficulties during the event, please reach out to Michael Effler. Thank you for your efforts today from the OIT side. There will be an optional 15 minutes at the end from 1 to 1:15. This is your choice to be in group 1 or group 2, and I will post the group 2 in a second here. But this is a webinar style for the first 2 hours, but then we really want to open it up to that interactive. So that's the last 15 minutes if you have the time to join us. So thank you to presenters and thank you to the audience. And so excited that you're here. Also, thank you to Allie Perks and Jerome McKay for their efforts in planning. So now I will pass it over to Drs. Flagg, Babarda, and Dunn, and we will kick off today's event. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Diane, and I'm happy to make some comments and hand it over to my colleagues, Dr. Babarda and Dunn. So let me add my welcome to what Diane has said. Welcome to this webinar, and for those not familiar with our campus, not from our campus, welcome to the CU Anschutz Medical Campus community. We feel we have a strong culture of collaboration here as people come to visit and talk, and they say, what characterizes the work you do at CU Anschutz? One thing comes through very clearly is that a culture of collaboration, working together, interdisciplinary work as a part of that. So as Diane and I and others were thinking about ways we can bring researchers together for a common purpose, this seems like a very intriguing and exciting group to bring together. So we're very happy to have the interest of both Marty and Vic to do this. And I want to also add my thanks to Diane's for all of those, to Diane herself specifically, and all those who brought this together. Again, I think this represents the collaborative spirit and everything that's really important to us here at CU Anschutz. So I look forward to the discussion today, and thanks to everybody for joining. So let me hand things over to Marty and Vic. And Vic, would you like to make some comments next?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks everybody for coming out, and we have a great 2 hours. It's definitely packed every minute, but it's fantastic. So I'm professor of emergency medicine and director of the Center for Combat Research at Anschutz, which I'll tell you more about. And we had a couple of great comments before this of this event being sort of the archetype or the Grammy of collaboration across campuses. So Dean Dunn and I are very excited. Dean Dunn's been very collaborative in this, and I'm excited to not just do this one thing, but recurring to kind of build that clinical engineering collaboration across campuses and on campus as well. This has just been a wonderful opportunity for that cross-cutting ethos that Vice Chancellor Flagg just pointed out. The DoD is heavily invested in engineering, and I think you'll hear more about that. We have some of the 3 most regarded thought leaders in DoD capability gaps, as they say, or needs, and you're going to hear from them. Some phenomenal engineers that Dean Dunn has picked out and leaders. And please ask questions on the chat, live, after this, because that's the whole goal, is stimulate conversation. So Dean Dunn.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Babarda, and thanks, Professor Flagg, for all the work and kind of helping pull this together. And I can't tell you how excited I am kind of on behalf of our college. And kind of we're a College of Engineering, Design, and Computing. I'll say more in the next session about kind of our college, but at the core, a key strategy of ours is to bring kind of our fantastic engineering talent to the table to address important problems in healthcare. And I think there's no better place to do that than on the CU Anschutz Medical Campus, and no better people to collaborate with than the folks kind of on that campus. So this is really kind of important for us. You know, we have a lot of activities kind of already in place through various collaborations on the campus that we'll talk about. And we're looking to kind of amplify, you know, that impact kind of through collaborations going forward. And so like kind of Vic had mentioned, to me, this is sort of the tip of the iceberg to kind of get a lot of these constructive conversations started. And, you know, I'm excited to see kind of where they go. I know there's a lot of kind of fantastic opportunities and impact that will result from this. So again, thank you to Diana, to Allie, and to everybody that was helpful in pulling all of this together.
This is wonderful. And I'm just going to add a couple more contextual comments here. So I know we've got a group from CWAN shoots, from some of our affiliates, from our colleagues at the DoD. We're delighted to have all of you here. And just again, for those less familiar with our campus, one of the challenges is we've got 5,000 faculty members on the CWAN shoots campus. We are aligned very closely with CU Denver. So Marty and I speak about this frequently. One of the challenges is simply trying to bring groups of people together, specifically from different disciplines and expertise. And so I think that's why there's so much excitement for this particular thing. Our research portfolio in a given year has ranged between $500 and $600 million, largely of biomedical work. But again, engineering has become a big part of that portfolio. And then with the work of Dr. Babarda in the Combat Center, these have been two of our really, I think, marquee programs over the last few years. And I'm really excited, again, just to say it, to see how these come together and ways that you find synergies and connections there. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Diane, unless she wants to go directly to the next section here, which is with Dr. Babarda.
Yeah, we'll just go on to Dr. Babarda to introduce your group.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pull some slides up real quick, and I want to something. Let me make sure I got this right. Hang on. Are you seeing? I love Zoom. I've been doing it for a year, and I'm still not doing it right. Let's see. Hang on. Are you guys seeing the slide?
We see your slides, but it's the whole slide deck.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Flaherty, give me 1 second. Oh, man. How many Zoom calls have I had in the last year? And I'm still trying to figure this out. Okay.
Make me feel better. I appreciate it. That's good.
All right. Can you? Okay, great. So one thing that's quite symbolic, yes, is yesterday actually Dr. Flaherty was talking about collaboration and bringing together geographically distant campuses. You know, Dean Dunn and I, actually, we've talked a lot in the last, 8-9 months. We actually got to meet in person yesterday on campus, which was just symbolically very important as we hopefully come out of this COVID time, but really we talk a lot about bringing campuses together and sharing and getting people on both campuses and ideas on both campuses. So, so fantastic. It was very, very symbolic yesterday. We're right on time. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the Combat Center that's on at CU Anschutz with support and help of Dr. Flaherty and Riley, and of course my boss, Dr. Zane, and just an overview. And I'll leave the details of what the DoD needs to our experts. So I'm Vic Babarda. I direct the center here on campus. I'll tell you a bit about it. And then I'm the Vice Chair of Strategy for Growth for our department, a professor here of emergency medicine. I work clinically. I'm working here in just a few hours in the hospital, and I enjoy it. I'm also in the reserves now. I did 14 years active duty, 4 combat deployments, and I've been in the reserve since I've been on campus, which has been about 5 years. So we talk about the center here. It's just, we call it the Center for Combat Medicine and Battlefield Research, the Combat Center, or the Center for Combat Research. Our main focus is that we try to improve combat casualty care and illness through innovation, research, and advanced development with military and civilian collaboration. That lines up not with just NIH funding, but partners in engineering and NSF and industry. And so we really kind of get products, patents, ideas, companies, and big grants out together to solve the DoD's toughest clinical problems. That's really important for us, and that's for our focus, for the warrior and the medic. We are deployment focused, so I'll talk about that for a second. And we cut across all disciplines. The center does as well. We're on the campus, our people are, but we're actually working with all the campuses, at least Denver and Boulder for the most part as well. And so just because we're located here doesn't mean we actually work across. We've actually had some potential strong opportunities at the other campuses as well. And hopefully this is one. This is one of our goals for the Combat Center, the cross discipline. So if you're not around the military, just to give you a little background, we focus on deployment, or we call operational areas. And so true military things, that's what the Combat Center does. The DoD has money in other areas as well, but this is where we focus on. This is where the most funding and opportunities are as well. So deployment was when you go to Afghanistan or Iraq or Africa, when you go downrange. So we talk about, we have areas that we like to focus on: team training, team dynamics, and pre-deployment. And then the actual deployment piece, which is transport of people or patients in route care, pre-hospital care, like the paramedic and training and the medics, brain injury, burn, blood transfusion, sepsis, trauma, critical care, CBURN or RAD chemical countermeasures or antidotes and drugs, and then sleep and hearing and ways to improve those for human performance. And then as they get back, pain they have, suicide needs, substance abuse, those types of things. That's kind of the focus that we have for the center generally. When we talk about cross-cutting, again, it's in how the center is made up. So the center actually cuts across emergency medicine. It's a joint venture between the emergency medicine department, surgery department, anesthesiology department, and the dean as well. So it's not just one specialty. I mean, we in our heart, we actually in our DNA, we believe in cross-cutting specialties with PhDs and physicians and education as well. These are some of the folks you're going to hear from today. This is the heart of our Combat Center. We have some other grants and admin support staff. We have a steering committee that's across campus of senior leaders. But Dr. Flaherty, who you're going to hear from in a couple of minutes with some comments. Dr. McKay is our program manager who's helping run this. Dr. Keenan is our assistant director for pre-hospital operational and trauma strategy. One of our key leaders across the DoD, and Ms. Howell, who helps with our clinical lead and clinical studies as well. As we talk about different things, we'll talk about a few today. Technology innovation platforms is one of our important areas. It's not just about clinical trials, but we do that well as well to the right. And it's MIL-SIV collaboration. So NASA, Space Force, Space Command, our folks down in Texas, a lot of military assets down there, and they're just speaking today with us as well. We go back and forth. One question that comes up, just to be sure, is how we work together with our our civilian researchers and our investigators that are part of the Combat Center. What we try to do is summarize in a way with their idea, and that's what we're kind of doing today as well. With your idea, what's the military relevant? Who should we engage in the military that's important for this? Who are some active duty co-authors or collaborators that are natural collaborators on this? You'll hear from a couple. What are some military sites we can do? And then that pre-submission, pre-work, when we're at that point, what's the budget look like? What does DoD allow? What is a quad chart? Those types of things as we go through. And then we kind of go beyond that. Those resources on campus for this, but we try to do this, stay in the space of the military. What is relationships with industry? Can you do them? Are they okay? Yes, they are. What's the DoD look for IP and patents and FDA? What do they care about? What is HARPA? What are these acronyms like ACUROS? And how does that work with the IRB? And these co-op agreements, subcontracts, contracts, all these things we like to engage with and help our PIs be successful, and we have. When we talk about DoD, here's some of these acronyms. People think of CDMRP. Understand DoD funding is really a republic of different sponsors. And it's not just one. And we work with all of these. They all have different requirements, different questions, different needs, different focuses, different point of contacts. And so that's what we try and do, is help these investigators across these campuses and across CUs to reach one of those and deliver those solutions for DoD's toughest challenges. Some of the clinical pieces that we use, and we'll talk about this as well across campus that we engage with, we have the Lights Network, we have several clinical trials network, we have also obviously the Innovations Group, we have some translational labs, which we've talked about some of your engineers with, on how to do different things, take that out of the bench into a translational lab to get it into humans, into man and a woman. And that's part of that Combat does, it connects those. And we work with all of these entities and platforms for that. We go back and forth with extramural and intramural folks. So sometimes they'll lead a project that we'll participate in. Sometimes we will, and then they'll participate with us. And you'll hear from a couple of those. We'll mention a few folks' names. And so it's important for us to bring solutions. And sometimes that means we're not leading them. We're just facilitating. We're just helping. We're providing a device, a concept, a data, a question to them, and they're leading. And that's important for us in this relationship for our mission. One thing you're going to hear about today and discuss at the end of this, Diane mentioned, is a Breakout Impact. We uniquely are a part of this membership, CU School of Medicine and Combat Center is, that allows us, if you're a part of this membership, to get some competitive advantages on non-members. And so we're a part of this. It's working with us. We'll explain it, what that means, and how then you will have offerings that the public does not, because they're a part of these OTAs. And it's very important that we are a member, and it's actually been very beneficial for some of the work we've done. And it's very specific around prototyping, around design, around products, around solutions, which in my mind is more of an engineering solution than a knowledge product. So this is important if we're MTech focused on. And I'm not going to go to all the priorities. I do want to say that when we talk about generally where the priorities are, as you look down into number 5, you talk about focus on human force, human performance, delay to definitive care, these asymmetric combat settings, all these things you're going to hear about. Number 5 for the DoD in the future battlefield, battle space is digital health and bioengineering, which is why Dean Dunn and I have talked so much about this collaboration, because this is where they're going in the Futures Command. Okay, so that's the Combat Center. I'll wrap up and pull these slides down, and then Dr. Flaherty, who has many hats, is one that has a few welcoming comments as well. Great.
Would you like me to go, Vic?
Hang on just 1 second. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brigadier General Kathleen Flaherty, and as Vic mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director for the Center for Combat Research. In my military job, I'm an MA to the Command Surgeon for Air Mobility Command. So in that command, we're responsible for the air medical evacuation, the critical care air transport teams, and the en route portion for the Air Force. So Dr. Flegg, Dr. Dunn, Colonel Weissel, Dr. Mallory, CU engineering scientists, Dr. Bodine, Jennifer Wagner, Dr. Weir, and Dr. Smith, and joining participants, thank you for being here for this collaborative discussion. And one of the things that Vic, as a servant, humble leader, his vision and his leadership really has helped us get to the Center for Combat Research of where we're at today. I just want to talk about where the battlefield is. And the battlefield of tomorrow against a near peer or peer adversary, an anticipated environment where we don't have air superiority or freedom of movement in the battle space, will require a different way of caring for casualties than we've done in the past. And as a result, the medical force, the medical technology of the future must be here as well. The multi-domain battlefield of the future will not always offer optimal or even desirable casualty care scenarios. The future threat environment may require casualty care holding that exceeds our current evacuation planning factors, known as prolonged field care or prolonged casualty care, or as frankly said, holding on to sicker patients than you can care for longer than you want, with fewer resources than you need in a place you don't want to be. So we need evolving technologies and supporting capabilities designed to support these patient care in these challenging environments. So you and your ideas are needed to foster this collaborative research efforts to address DoD gaps and future needs. So thank you for being here. Over to you, Diane.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And now we will go over to our DoD section.
Great. I'll introduce Colonel Weissel. I just want to say, for folks, I had an IT glitch there, Dr. Flaherty. If folks don't know her, you can Google her. She's a Brigadier General here. She's one of the strongest female leaders across the DoD service as well. We're lucky to have her as an asset and as a deputy commander in the Combat Center. But she's well respected in the community, in the military, and the civilian side, and on UC Health and UC Anschutz. So we're lucky to have her here. She's phenomenal. So, all right. Thanks for those comments, by the way. Colonel Eric Weissel is a trained bioengineer as well as an ENT surgeon. He has had several leadership opportunities across the service and deployment settings as well. He's right now the SGO, or Chief of Operational Medicine, and we refer to operational medicine sort of combat-related medicine at this time. He used to be the Deputy Commander of the Army Institute of Surgical Research, and is very focus-minded on true solutions. He has a couple of platforms he's going to talk about that he uses and where the DoD wants to go across services, not just the Air Force. So, Colonel Weissel. He's coming on here. I think he's on mute. Let's see if we can get him out there.
Comms check.
Oh, affirmative. We got you.
All right, perfect. Let's see. Okay, so thanks for having me and entertaining this conversation. Dr. McKay or whoever's controlling the slides, are you able to push my slide deck? Oh, Mr. Effler.
So Colonel Weissel, this is Amber. The slide deck is arranged for me to go first, but they can go ahead and flip to your slides since you're up. I think it's slide 10, and then we can come back to me. Oh, there you go. He has it. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Mallory, and thank you all for engaging us in this. So I'm going to speak about, actually, I guess doing these out of order, I'm going to be speaking about a specific new opportunity for investigators, and I'm hoping that this will excite imaginations amongst the crowd today. The project that I'm going to be speaking about is called the Defense Readiness Education and Material Laboratory for Austere Care Nascent Delivery, also known as Dreamland. Next slide. Can we advance the slides, please?
I think we're on the science of perishable knowledge. That's the slide.
Oh, we are?
Yep.
Okay, it just didn't show up on mine. So the principle upon which we're starting with is we were looking to take what we have here locally and try to make something meaningful in terms of a research model from it that others can experiment with it. The collection of assets within the Air Force on 59th Medical Wing includes a lot of people, human capital. And within that, we have a lot of people that deploy all the time. The main problem we seem to have is that not all of these people have a very good ops tempo. So they're not deploying all the time, and so the efforts to train them often result in a slow withering of their skills. And the question has come up, what is the ops tempo necessary in order to keep readiness at a perpetually high state? And that is currently unknown, and a subject of a lot of controversy, and there's a lot of desire in that space to understand this. So to understand how humans forget, which is the principle behind why we need to train and reinforce that training, we go back to Hermann Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, designed back in the 1885. This is a German psychologist who did a lot of experimentation on recognizing the very, very similar pattern and stable pattern by which humans forget. Turns out it's important that humans forget. It's one of the selection advantages we've had as a species. If we remembered everything, we would probably be scared to death, never leave our houses, and would be outcompeted for resources by other species. So the fact that we do forget allows us to take risks. And but you'll see that by day 30, a didactic lecture that we would have spent an hour on, we only have a memory of approximately 20% of the contents of that. And that's kind of a fairly standard feature across humans. So we then, you know, when the generals get together and they see this kind of numbers, they start saying, oh, that's a pretty bad return on investment in terms of our education that we're investing a lot of money into. What do we do to fix that? And the answer is sustainment. Sustainment done in very smart, low low density, high frequency sort of interventions. And if done in a very, very precise way, you can take a few 20-minute interventions and get a massive return on investment of your initial education effort. And so what we see here is by doing 3 staged sustainment efforts, one at 19 minutes, one at 1 day, and one at 7 days, you can take that initial 20% retention and move it up to 70, 80, 90% retention of your initial education and training investment. Next slide, please. So what that means for those of us that are active duty and sitting around and waiting for wars to happen, you know, on the upper green arrow here is what happens with CCAT. You know, if we're at war and we're activating our CCAT, UTC all the time, they're always going out. You know, these 24 teams that we have on site here are getting constant reinforcement, and they're always at a perpetual state of readiness. However, in between war, or in a kind of a like low ops tempo sort of war setting like we are right now, we now are looking at fading skills and sending teams that we're very concerned with their performance characteristics on flight. So we need some sort of sustainment effort in order to deal with these perishable skills and make them more durable. Next slide. So as I said, you know, the need there is a solution to maintain the perishable skills of operational medicine in between formal education and training validations. And the main questions we currently have are, what are these perishable skills of operational medicine? How quickly do they fade? And what is the most efficient transportable solution to maintain these skills? Next slide. So the overall research that we want to start with, our initial grant that we're going after, is an effort to look at the en route care or movement of patients through our transfer mechanism. And so with this grant, or the protocol that we're currently considering or getting considered for funding, we are trying to integrate the GST, the ground surgical team, the EMEDS team, the ERPS team, the CCAT team, and the AE team. So 5 different major UTCs that all make up the en route care system, and integrate all of these into a continuum of care. And you'll see we use a porcine model in this, whereby we can inspect and understand the perishable skills in our personnel here on base as they deteriorate. And that way we'll be able to recognize what are those perishable skills and start attempting to intervene and reinforce those through smart, small package sustainment efforts. The other really interesting thing, well, so, and our initial approach is going to be low dose, high frequency sort of engagements. We reckon that rather than having to repeat the 1 hour lecture over and over again, there are ways to do this smart in small 5-minute increments, or using some advanced teaching equipment like augmented reality coupled with high fidelity haptic trainers. Next slide. The additional opportunities here that I think would attract engineers and outside of, you know, the high-tech teaching solutions are we will be studying interoperability with this, and that's something that isn't done anywhere else within or with any kind of frequency. We will have these UTCs working together, and as they transfer a patient, we're going to be able to see, oh, the equipment isn't compatible with the new UTC. Oh, they need a smarter tool to pass the information along from patient from team to team. Oh, the suction pump that they are using doesn't actually work with the new team's equipment. There's no way to pass equipment back and forth between these 2 different UTCs. And then as we expand this to also involve the Navy, Army, and government, non-federal disaster medicine programs, these questions will then perpetuate amongst all of those as to how are we truly interoperable with our FEMA and other disaster medicine colleagues. So we're excited to see this grow. The effort's in its incipient stages. We would love to have University of Colorado Denver as a partner in this. We've been getting a lot of reach from the Texas systems, and would love to have you guys as a partner. So look forward to working with you guys. Over.
Thanks, Colonel Weissel. Great opportunity. We'll actually be able to talk more about some of the work you're doing as we kind of go in this conversation and have it back and forth with the panelists. So next up is Dr. Mallory, I think. So Dr.
Yes.
Mallory Amber Mallory is a collaborator and a friend. She's also the Director for Trauma and Clinical Care Research at the 59th Medical Wing at the Office of the Science and Technology there. So she also worked with the Navy before, so she can actually cover both services, even though right now she's working with the Air Force. She's actually, personally, she's one of the strong female leader across the DoD research enterprise. We're lucky to be a partner with her. She's a PhD scientist by training as well, and leads the largest research trauma program for the Air Force out of Texas. So Dr. Mallory, thank you.
Wow, thanks. You make it sound so glamorous. But appreciate the introduction. And Colonel Weissel, thank you for kind of setting the stage there. If you move to the next slide, I have the obligatory disclaimer, but then to the outline, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the future fight and product requirements that the General previously described in her introduction. And then what we're looking to hopefully modernize and how we think that you guys might be able to help advance some of those technologies and participate in research with us. So if you move to slide 3 and then 4. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to slide 4. Thank you. So the future conflict, as mentioned, is likely to occur with near peer adversaries in dense urban environments. However, we're also interested in unique factors, including climate. So how technologies may also perform in cold weather or Arctic conditions. We're really interested in researching and modernizing things that would help to detail care of patients during a mass casualty or triage situation. Also advanced technologies, including thermobaric weapons, and how to treat patients with polytrauma, including severe pulmonary injuries, how to manage their airways, ways to put them on ECLS or extracorporeal life support, and also to treat military injuries like burns. Those are very common. Currently, and as you probably have seen in the news, there's always IEDs in Afghanistan and Iraq and the Middle East there. And so we're consistently looking at how to treat patients that have amputations, extremity trauma, hemorrhage and hemorrhage control, and also TBIs related to such blast injuries. Other areas of interest include directed energy, which would be potentially radio frequency or microwaves that could be used as a way to stun or debilitate warfighters, as well as lasers, which can be used to maybe dazzle or cause constriction of sight for pilots. Also, if we're not able to transport folks out, then we need to be able to better manage their pain and care for them. And that's kind of coupled with the prolonged field care initiative. I think a great area of research to work with engineers specifically on is unmanned evacuation and delayed evacuation. So how can we develop robotics and get trust in those robotics to help care for patients if the manpower is not there, simply not there to care for them, and they have a potentially survivable injury. In addition to, there's always the threat of chemical and biological nuclear warfare. And so how do we manage trauma in those situations, particularly for chemical and biological, where you have containment issues as well. On the right, there is just a schematic of the kind of complicated situation of being in an urban environment where you have again, that contested airspace, maybe communications are jammed. You have large buildings that you have to navigate. There may be no power. How do you clear those buildings? How do you care for patients if the roads are blocked and there's no access, as well as the threat of subterranean type of assault. So moving on to slide 5. I kind of mentioned this already, but we're really looking for game changers. So what are these game changers? So I think, thank you. Yeah, the prolonged field care situation where we're looking where we may not be able to evacuate people out for up to 72 hours. Again, how do we care for those patients? And there's a great deal of work on medical sensors and devices. But as Dr. Babarda mentioned, how are those compatible with existing technologies to include strategies for ECLS or extracorporeal life support and other closed loop ventilation systems. Another thing is remote learning and how do we translate information from a care provider that is specialized in something but might not be present. And then of course, overall modernization and getting rid of some of those antiquated technologies and really focusing on new mechanisms for medical simulation and training, which is part of that focus that Colonel Weissel was talking about with that Dreamland initiative. So moving on to slide 6, please. Sorry. So again, those game changers, looking at ways to also incorporate and handle big data. I think you guys have a strong program in that. Getting access to a lot of records can be difficult and challenging, but we're here to help. From the government, I'm here to help you. But we can help navigate that if there's a project that you find would be interesting and helpful to the military. We can help navigate how to get those records. I think I mentioned all these. One thing that I do want to kind of stress on is prevention of wound infection. So again, in that prolonged field care situation, we're interested in preventing wound infection since we may not be always in a clean environment. Also, something that I didn't really discuss yet is improved human performance. And so sleep, fatigue, nutrition, also just general behavioral and well-being are all things that I'm sure engineering could have a unique aspect and way to improve outlooks of how to be an integrated approach with collaborations between the clinicians, the PhDs, and also the engineers. So then moving on to slide 7, and I'm gonna be wrapping up here, but this is just a list of really qualities. Sorry, it's in the next slide. It has just a bunch of words on it, but these words are very important, like lightweight, rugged, durable, portable. These are things that need to be considered when you're developing your technology. So this isn't, something, we're not looking for things that can be on a bench top and stay there for 15 years. We're really looking for things that will be manpower multipliers, compatibility across the world, able to be operable in no light or blackout conditions. So as you're considering your designs, these are things that you should be considering upfront, particularly if you're interested in a military partnership. And so also first, the next slide, slide 8, we're looking at importance of end user input. And of course, that would be the clinicians. What are they using? Is it usable? Can it be applicable in multiple environments, multifunctional? Is there issues with using it in the air and underwater, in space even? And then finally, the last slide is, will it work for the military? On slide 9, we're talking about key factors for success, and we don't work in a vacuum. We have to work with our partners, and our real mission is to return the warfighter to the mission. And so we do this through through technology advancement through the continuum of care. So I'll stop there because I think we need to pass it on to Dr. Keenan, who's going to talk a little bit about what happens to technologies and how the gaps are really defined. So how do we decide what to research? So thank you for the time, and I'm happy to entertain any questions offline or at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mallory. Appreciate it. I always learn something from her. I took a couple of notes myself. I've been doing this for a long time. So Dr. Keenan is our next speaker, and he is a retired Army colonel. I think some people associate retired colonel with being old. Sean's not old. He's very young. We're about the same age. He's also, we're lucky to have him because he's our assistant director at the Combat Center for Pre-Hospital Trauma and Operational Strategy. He's also an associate professor here on campus for an emergency medicine. And so Dr. Keenan worked in special operations units his entire career. So just for some military terminology, that's that group, special operations, the Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Rangers, pararescue, those folks, and had several deployments in his last war as well. He's a thought leader for this group, this very elite group in particular. It's important to understand that this group is also, if we were to pick the innovators, the adaptable innovators of the DoD, it's this group of special operators and these entities, Special Operations Command. And so they provide ruthless feedback to down select products, improvised products, and they're sort of test bed for a lot of the conventional stuff that happens across the DoD. He was also the command surgeon for the Special Operations Europe. And so he led sort of the concept of prolonged field care. He actually sort of coined or innovated that initial term. He's going to talk about joint trauma system, but either way, I could go on for a bit. We're lucky to have him. So Dr. Keenan.
Hey, Vic, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Just audio check. Oh, outstanding. Thanks. Again, flattered to be asked to talk here. Vic, you are young as well. And I'd like to say thank you for inviting me, and really excited to share kind of what's going on within the Department of Defense. One of my jobs is a consultant to the Joint Trauma System. I'm an emergency medicine and emergency medical services physician. And I also, kind of on the side, I routinely train Special Operations Forces almost on a monthly basis in prolonged field care. And so I want to talk more about the Joint Trauma System and where some of those requirements come from. So next slide, please. So, what is the Joint Trauma System, or the JTS, as we call it? So the mission is to improve trauma readiness and outcomes through evidence-driven performance improvement. And we specifically use the term performance improvement. We don't conduct research, but we continually look at the clinical delivery of trauma care across the full spectrum of capabilities within the Department of Defense in real time. And through that, that helps inform the clinical practice guidelines and also the education and training of the next generation, or even the next month's people going down, downrange into harm's way. We are absolutely focused on trauma care data collection and analysis, but most recently, we tend to look at all hazards because we have become the COVID registry data and analysis. And so that's what has taken up, most of our time, as well as pretty much everyone else's time. And probably the reason that we're not here in person, but rather on Zoom meetings, is because of COVID. So we have embraced that opportunity to manage and develop the COVID registry for the Department of Defense. The Joint Trauma System is, in fact, a larger coalition of the willing. So they're a small group of full-time employees, but they're also a large group of participants, committees, and also consultants, of which I am one. So next slide, please. So when we look at what is analogous to the civilian side, we actually have direct correlations to the American College of Surgeons and a very close formal collaboration with them. They have the Committee on Trauma, and we have the Defense Committees on Trauma. They have an quality improvement, and we have that. And so across the board, we are looking at all deployed forces as well as our fixed medical treatment facilities all around the world. So wherever the Department of Defense is operating, we are actually monitoring and watching and performing and doing performance improvement. Next slide, please. So when we look at this, one of the Sentinel papers, Death on the Battlefield, where they actually looked at how do people die in the first 10 years of conflict between 2001 and 2010. So Brian Eastridge and his colleagues looked at this. And what they found out when they analyzed, and one thing that is unique about the Department of Defense is we have 100% autopsies. So we can actually look and study why is it that people die. But we found out that close to 1/4 of them, battlefield deaths, were potentially survivable. And in fact, 87.3% of those were in the pre-medical treatment facility or pre-hospital environment. And when we look at this, and what drives a lot of the research and the questions out there is looking at the cause of death, in which clearly hemorrhage is one of the major ones, but also upper airway obstructions and chest trauma and some of the other ones. But these are some of the, using our trauma registry, these are some of the products that we put out within the Joint Trauma System. Next slide, please. So the trauma registry, it is a very comprehensive and probably one of the most comprehensive trauma registries, in the United States, if not the world. And so when we look at this, there are a number of different subsections which feed into the trauma registry. The motor is the orthopedic trauma registry. We have TBI neuro, infectious disease, and also with some of the other vision and acoustics and looking at outcomes. We are actively looking to incorporate, we have a separate pre-hospital registry. Mercury, which is an en route care. So if you can imagine moving, patients, whether that be via helicopter, truck, or even large transport plane across the world. There are burn registries, and recently incorporated was actually the care of canine war wounded and then others. And so our end state really is to have a 360-degree view as to how is it that people get injured, ill, or wounded in the military. Next slide. Next slide, please. So how is this cycle of performance improvement done? So there is the care delivery at the top. From that, we try to collect as much of the data that's out there, which then gets into the registry. From there, we do a very careful analysis, perform what's called, performance improvement. And then what happens is we then incorporate that directly into the best practice guidelines that are out there. And those are published, and I'll show you where they are in a few slides here. So next slide, please. I mentioned the Defense Committees on Trauma. There are 3 main committees, of which you may have heard of the Committee of Tactical Combat Casualty Care, or TC3 or T-Tri-C. Those are basically the first aid standards, which we train all service members. There's also the En route Care Committee and the Surgical Combat Casualty Care Committee. Each of these committees meet on either a monthly or a quarterly basis to look at relevant data to decide where they need to look at. And they are a coalition of many times those practitioners that have come back from recent deployments and have that relevant experience, as well as specialty leaders, subject matter experts, and that helps drive the initiatives, which again, identify those research gaps, which then are communicated over to the research side. Of note, there is a new working group, and that is the Prolonged Casualty Care Committee. And if you can imagine prolonged field care, but applied across all service members to include the Navy, the Air Force, and some of our other collaborators. So when you hear the term prolonged casualty care, or PCC, that is the more of a blanket and all-encompassing statement over prolonged field care. Both of those committees deal with pre-hospital or care before they reach a defined surgical committee, so pre-hospital. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we do have the CPGs, or the Clinical Practice Guidelines. These were originally developed for surgical teams and deployed surgeons, but have since grown to encompass en route care and also prolonged field care. And these are essentially the training standards which set the standard for what healthcare practitioners will do and use. They are the best practices based on both available evidence as well as informed senior decision making. But this is really what drives our standards for providing trauma care on the battlefield when any of our medical practitioners go downrange. And this is an example from the website, and I'll show you the website again in the last slide, but it's jts.amed.army.mil. Next slide, please. So most interestingly, just in the past 2 years, we actually looked at subject matter experts, and we provide that Defense Committee on Trauma many different subject areas and asked them, based on their relevant practice, what are the top 10 current battlefield issues? And some of those that are highlighted directly speak to our trauma care. But right up front, the capability and capacity for whole blood transfusions. Anybody that's followed military medicine and pre-hospital medicine, within the last 10 years, there's been an explosion of providing timely and very quick, and by timely, I mean within 30 minutes of receiving massive trauma, whole blood transfusions. And so the system as a whole is looking at how to enable that, because obviously that's the logistics of the system issue as well. As we talked about, documentation, data collection, that is always a priority for us, because if we don't have the data, we can't look at it to inform that. We're looking at standardizing joint evacuation platforms and communications plans. Again, a lot of this goes to computer technology, it goes to devices and logistics and systems rather than pure medical treatment. And you can kind of see those others, there on this list. Next slide, please. So lastly, these are the multimedia resources that you can look at. There is the JTS website, which very much has some of our policies and clinical practice guidelines. And then we also have an app called Deployed Medicine, where you can actually look at the clinical practice guidelines. You can look at the tactical combat casualty care guidelines and really get a sense as to what is expected of combat medics all the way up through deployed hospitals as far as the DoD standards there. So again, I am excited to have presented this to you. I work again with the Joint Trauma System, but I'm also one of the assistant directors here for combat. And getting just to the slides that Dr. Mallory talks about with the qualities of innovative technology, the question of is it military relevant and does it work for the military? I think that's where my advisor role is really there. So happy to help with any of the ideas going forward. So I'll turn it back over to Vic, and thank you again for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Keenan. Great work. So this is we have opportunity for Q&A here, and maybe Diane, should I just sort of summarize that there's some of the information, and then maybe I have a question to warm it up a little bit as folks can do questions. And the questions, as I understand it, Diane, they can put it in the chat. Dr. McKay is monitoring that. They can ask it out loud as well. Perfect. So we kind of heard some good information from Dr. Mallory and Dr. Weissel and Dr. Keenan. So Dr. Weissel, Colonel Weissel, talked a lot about the needs of training and learning and some of the fatigue that happens over time. And the example he had is around Dreamland, and that's important to maintain our trained force. And he'll talk about some other work as well. Dr. Mallory actually talked, again, I took some notes there, sort of that top list that actually overlaps a little bit with Dr. Keenan's, but what are the big needs around autonomous, around devices, around technology, and some of those words that she mentioned, universal capability, user-friendly, portable, rugged, that's important as we go into the rest of this next hour of discussion, and then applications. And Dr. Keenan really spoke on the Joint Trauma System. So they oversee all the trauma stuff, all the combat casualty care that goes on. They've gotten bigger over time, and really talk about that top 10 list that you saw. If you're taking notes on that, the good top 10 list of where some of the needs are for the DoD. So with that, I'll ask my first question to the group is, we talk a little bit about autonomous devices and in healthcare and for the combat setting. Could someone or a couple of you sort of share with us, the audience, like what's an example or two of that that we have or we've been working on, and what's an example or two that we need, like hard examples?
I can say something. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, one autonomous device that might slip your thinking is the biosensor as a tool to analyze and interpret physiology. I think it's, we all recognize that biosensors are on the cusp of really completely revolutionizing healthcare in general. We'd like to see better integration of that into the operational medicine en route care. And so when we talk about autonomous systems, and that can give us better reach, a tool that is monitoring the physiology of the patient, doing a better job of keeping a physiologic record as the patient transfers through a series of different teams, and give some sort of continuity assessment to that team, I think is very powerful. The other, obvious drone delivery is blood on the battlefield. That's kind of a big target. We need to do more than just draw this on paper. We need to actually test this and see how it actually integrates into a team setting. Is it worth the squeeze? Is it more trouble than it's worth? So we need to actually get in the field and do some, medical proving of these technologies to see how they actually supplement rather than they sound really good in a closed room with a bunch of smart people around a table. Over.
So I want to also just name some specific technologies as well. And actually, I thought Colonel Weissel was going to go for this, but limb preservation. And so there's some really unique efforts to look at autonomous pumps to be able to do tissue preservation in hopes of salvaging limbs. And so I think that engineering is a wonderful, feat, and having those collaborations with clinicians who might be involved with those surgeries, or how to actually maintain that function, nerve function, viability, and prevent necrosis, that would be huge. And DARPA has some programs that are really looking at this. And then the military is a transition partner for that, but also academia too. So I think some of that pump type of autonomous technology for multiple, not just limbs, but for other clinical applications is something that could also be further developed, even just for maintenance, fluid maintenance for dehydration, things like that as well. So that way you don't have to have a clinician come and check those electrolytes. That could be a biosensor, connected to a pump that will up or increase or decrease, the rate of flow autonomously. Over.
Hey, Vic, I get a quick clinical problem here. Talking about blood, we're very good at starting blood. We don't know when to slow down or stop resuscitation. So if we just said there were 3 critically injured patients, 1 medic, and 4 units of blood, how is it that we monitor that person? How is it that we decide who is it that gets that blood? How is it that we decide how to slow that down, or perhaps triage the patient to realize that they need more than just blood and maybe they'll die? And then lastly, how is it that we enable a walking blood bank in order to be able to provide the next units of blood that will have to go to that patient's resuscitation? So that's a pretty common problem, I would say, but wrapped within that are many different research questions, and we have only started to begin to look at those kind of clinical questions. Over.
Good. That's perfect. It's a great, a good example for the audience. Questions through the chat or even just live. Folks have questions. I'll add one more in. We got like a minute, so I'll add one more in. So a lot of times we talk a little bit about, I think, and Dr. Mallory got at this, is we talk a lot about like things in your hand. Like we actually do work with wearables, Col Weissel, and sensors and whatnot. But there's a lot around bioengineering that's around biological solutions. So cells, blood, which is a little bit what Colonel Keenan was talking about, prosthetics, which we're gonna get into, other things. Can the audience or can the panelists speak a little bit to that piece of it? What might be some needs around the biological solutions that can come in engineering, bones and that type of thing that they can, make in a 3D printer downrange and input? What might be the needs of those?
So I forget it. Hold on, let me see if I'm on mute. No. Okay. So I think that definitely ease of use. So if you're developing applications for 3D printer, you got to think about who's using it. So it has to be very user friendly and with like embedded templates. So, like for whatever screw or something that you're going to print. So that way there's just really no room for error on that. I think another thing I wanted to kind of piggyback on Dr. Keenan's thoughts is the walking blood bank is great if we had a universal option to create, or an option to create universal blood. So enzymatic removal of antigen, and then filtration to remove anything like that. That is something, filtration devices, with low, like gravity filtration takes forever. But if you don't have electricity, is there a way to expedite that to create blood products, as well as multifunctional resuscitation fluid? So if I don't have whole blood, what is the next best thing? And is there a way to create, a synthetic blood? I mean, that's the, holy grail, but that is something that I think we're getting closer to with like maybe 3D printing. Can you print biological components with a 3D printer? I don't know if you could do that in Afghanistan or Antarctica, but that's something that we need the creative thinkers to figure it out. So I just wanted to kind of talk about those couple of things. I'm not sure if the others have something to add.
I was going to say, if you do want to test it in Antarctica, we do have the NSF facility now. So Jay Lemery and the gang. So here at CU, right? So Yes, we can try to freeze things, and I know a lot of people who can try to break things too. So if you have something that you're wondering if it's going to be rugged enough, I know a lot of people who are very good at breaking stuff.
Good.
So good point, actually. That is part of that, the concepts that Dr. Mary laid out as rugged, breakability, that type of thing. So we're actually at time, so I'm going to transition over to Diane and Dean Dunn. Now we'll have a little audible here because we have this panelist that's going to stay on. They're experts. They're the key leaders in the DoD research enterprise. So if we have 30 seconds or a minute after the end of each presenter, if we can maybe potentially flip a question or two, or the presenter can ask the panelist rather than saving it all for the last 15 minutes. So good. Diane, Dean Dunn, thanks for our panelists as well. Great talks. Really right on to this audience.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a great first half. And we will jump into the College of Engineering, Design, and Computing. So I will pass it over to Dean Dunn. And Vic, I do love that idea. If people have questions and the panelists end about a minute early, we can take questions in the Q&A function. So Dean Dunn,
Perfect.
Off to you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for the kind of wonderful preceding hour. I mentioned at the beginning that a key part of our strategy is to bring our engineering talent to address important problems in healthcare, to collaborate with clinicians and researchers at the Anschutz Medical Campus. And what I didn't mention is that, we really kind of, I think, a signature of our college is we're really focused on the research innovation interface. And part of why kind of being on the medical campus, why I keep telling our folks why it's so exciting to me is that's where the problem statements are. And as our folks work on really exciting problems, it's really important to be engaged in the right problem statements. I personally think that's just a huge kind of part of how to frame research, is kind of getting good problem statements. And I feel like for the last hour, I've been drinking and outstanding problem statements through a fire hose. I mean, it's just unbelievable how fast they were coming. So I think we're definitely at the right place. And I think we have a lot to add and kind of bring to the table. I'm just going to say a little bit about our college. I won't use any slides, but from a kind of 30,000 foot level, and highlight some of the relevant things, and then hand it over to kind of 4 of our faculty that will give you snapshots. And it's just sort of a teaser across some of our work. But I want to say a couple things kind of first before I do that. First, the name of our college is unique. It's College of Engineering, Design, and Computing. And it really is unique, and it's meant to reflect, our ambitions and a real contemporary perspective that we have on engineering education and research. It's really focused on building modern computing skills like AI, machine learning, data analytics throughout all of our engineering disciplines. We realize kind of our engineers need to be armed with these cutting edge technologies that on one hand they're creating, but on the other hand are kind of disrupting a lot of what they're doing as well. And the second kind of piece, design is really a signature of our program. And it's really about creating value, and it's, educating our students, and teaching them kind of methods and processes and building a toolbox to do so, to create, products, services, and systems through the technology kind of that's advancing so quickly, and to create value in a way that makes difference to people and to society. And so healthcare, really is kind of at the core of all of that. In brief, our college consists of 5 academic departments, and in each of them, we offer bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees. We have about 1,700 students kind of across our college, about 500 grad kind of students, about 100 faculty, about 60 of them that are tenure line. And for us, what a tenure line faculty member kind of signifies is that they spend about 40% of their time on teaching, 40% of their time on research, and 20% of their time kind of in service in one way or another. Kind of those departments kind of are civil engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and computer science, all of which kind of have faculty who have interests and active funded work around healthcare. Those 4 departments are homed on our downtown Denver campus, about 8 or so miles from the Anschutz Medical Campus. And then our 5th department, and perhaps in many ways the most kind of relevant kind of for our discussion today, is just an absolutely fantastic department of bioengineering that's homed on the Anschutz Medical Campus. It's headed by Professor Robin Shandis, who I think is in the audience kind of here today. And Robin kind of has helped over a short period of 10 years kind of build this our bioengineering department into kind of one of the finest in the country. And it's really kind of emblematic of our college. I think it's a department and a college that's really on the move. It's on a rapid growth trajectory in many dimensions, ranging from kind of enrollment, where we've grown by about 35% over the last 3 years, to research, where we've doubled kind of our kind of research awards and contracts over the last 3 years. And the large fraction of that has been kind of in our bioengineering department. Kind of that research comes largely from the NIH, from the Department of Defense, and from the National Science Foundation. But we have a growing kind of volume of research coming kind of from kind of corporate kind of sponsors and other government sponsors. Of those kind of 5 departments, in addition to those, our college homes an entity called InWorks, which is an innovation, is an innovation initiative that has a physical home and programming kind of on both campuses. It really provides design, prototyping capabilities across the Anschutz kind of medical campus, is increasingly kind of working more closely, and we're kind of dovetailing its activities and bringing them together with what we do kind of in bioengineering. I said our strategy, is to grow engineering and computer science at CU Anschutz. And let me just share with you a couple of tactics that kind of have been successful over the last couple of years. Kind of the first, and kind of my colleague, Professor Kathy Bodine, is sitting in front of it. I don't think it's real. I think it's a screenshot behind her, but I was just there, kind of a day ago, and that's a new building, Bioscience 3, kind of on the Anschutz campus, that homes kind of our kind of research and innovation kind of efforts across bioengineering, or a lot of bioengineering. Kind of we've launched, with support from the chancellor kind of at CU Anschutz, an initiative in medical technologies and in innovation. Professor Robin Shandis is leading kind of that initiative that's really looking at devices and kind of medical devices, and how to translate kind of research into products, to kind of navigate the reimbursement system and so forth. How it involves a lot of collaborations and building strong collaborations with industry. And just in the building that Kathy kind of is sitting in front of, is a great example of that, where we've got kind of research, kind of innovation activity sort of connected in a porous way. And we've got companies kind of in that building as well. So it's sort of it's a microcosm of an ecosystem that we really desire to be kind of a big part of. Maybe the third piece I'll mention that's all tied into this is last year, kind of as we're growing our capacity, we did a cluster hire where we hired 3 new faculty that have kind of homes in engineering, kind of with secondary or additional appointments in clinical units. And all of these kind of new faculty then kind of have their research anchored in Bioscience 3 on the Anschutz Medical Campus. And so we hired 3 fantastic faculty, kind of one in mechanical engineering doing biomechanics, and in bioengineering and pulmonary bioengineering, and one in computer science doing kind of AI, machine learning, and wearables. I'm going to hand it off kind of in a minute to our faculty to kind of give you a taste of some of the great work they're doing. But I want to emphasize that kind of really this is just, I mentioned it before, kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of, I think our capabilities, our interest in our ambition. you're going to hear from some faculty in bioengineering today, but there's additional expertise and funded research going on that just listening to the first hour that I know there's relevance there. So I want to just kind of react quickly and mention it. They're kind of expertise in neuroengineering, in imaging, in blood clotting, in 3D bioprinting. In our mechanical engineering department, we have kind of expertise in biomechanics and movement, a really significant effort around head health and protective wear, helmet technology, kind of new, it's been funded in this kind of by the NFL and in the sporting goods industry, and now have new funding from the Army, and a big emphasis on additive manufacturing, 3D printing, some biomaterials. I heard discussion kind of about robotics and UAVs. We've got a team across mechanical and electrical engineering kind of working in that space. It's funded by the DARPA Sub-T program right now, and sort of, there's a really good fit. And electrical engineering is filled with talent, kind of focusing on sensors and IoT, folks in AI and ML, kind of really kind of talented folks in vision, kind of vision systems, communication, signal processing, neuroengineering. And we have in our college computer science department, kind of where their kind of expertise in AI and ML, data science, a strength in cybersecurity, and related kind of expertise in VR, AR, kind of mixed reality, wearables, kind of focused on, human performance. And I heard somebody mention sleep. We have some kind of folks working with folks at CU Anschutz doing kind of sleep studies and sort of non-contact kind of sensing of that. And finally, I don't think anybody mentioned this, but I feel compelled to. Even within our civil engineering department, which you might think you got to look, long and hard to find biomedical, connections, but we have a fantastic group in construction engineering, and a key focus of theirs is on construction of healthcare facilities and uniqueness around that. And I think there's a lot of interest in temporary kind of facilities and construction and so forth. So I'll just kind of close. I think the talks are going to get now increasingly exciting once I'm done, and I can hand it over to our fantastic kind of faculty. And I'll kind of flip kind of as Vic did and kind of just briefly kind of introduce you, and then I think everybody will introduce themselves and say a little bit about their work. So with that, kind of first I want to introduce Professor Kathy Bodine, who leads our Center for Inclusive Design and Engineering, kind of in the Department of Bioengineering and in the school, crossing the School of Medicine. So Kathy?
Thank you so much, Marty. Can everyone see my slides? All right. So before I get started, I just want to say to everyone from the combat unit, thank you for your service. I really appreciate you guys and the work that you do, and its importance in our lives. I first got involved way back in the day during Operation Enduring Freedom. I ended up, my work is around technology for people with disabilities or those aging into disability. And when polyblast trauma first hit the stage in a big way, there were a lot of concerns. And so I ended up training over 1,200 clinicians within the VA, the VHA, the medical staff around the use of technology for all the ramifications with polyblast trauma. So it's fun to be here again today and to talk with you guys. So what I'm going to do is, as Marty said, it's a bit of a tease. I'm going to share with you very, very quickly a number of projects that are going on within my center. As Marty said, my center is the Center for Inclusive Design and Engineering. I also direct on behalf of our Colorado Clinical Translational Sciences Institute, the innovation ecosystem piece. And that is that notion of helping faculty, students, and staff translate their ideas out of the lab and into use at the bedside, in the marketplace, wherever they need to go. So that's another little hat that I wear here at the med school. So what is it that we do? We're very, very unique. We combine both clinical and engineering expertise to develop technology solutions. And this means I have a team of 25, and they are clinicians and they're engineers. And we bring everybody together, we put them in the room together, and we teach each other how to talk to each other, first and foremost. And we also teach each other how to be creative, how to be innovative, and how to figure out how we can best help folks. And we've all heard bench to bedside. In our little shop, we're bedside to curbside to community living. And so we look at all facets from being in the hospital on out the door and how you live the rest of your life. So that's very important to us. We have a lifespan approach. So one of the key things that happens when you combine all of these great people together is that you do great things. I'm really proud of my team. We just won Popular Science and Time Magazine Top 100 Inventions for our work that we did with an industry partner, taking advantage of some of the things that are available on autonomous vehicles. There are over 10,000 serious injuries every year for people in powered mobility devices, and sometimes resulting in death. And so we have co-developed a system that enables people to not fall off the curb, to not have an accident, and to travel throughout their home or community without tearing down the walls as they drive. So that's something we're very proud of, and came out of our shop in collaboration with our partners. One of the key things we started about 15 years ago was a product testing, usability, and user experience lab. And this is really based on the notion that we use assistive technologies, we use mainstream technologies, and we use medical devices. And all of these items need to be accessible to whoever the end user might be. Chief among this is the development in collaboration with our Department of Neuropsychology, a cognitive test battery. So we have it's about an hour and a half to 2 hour assessment that we do with everyone that comes through our user testing lab. And what this is enabling us to do is to begin to build a data set, a large scale data set on cognitive profiles, and then to be able to look at user error, user issues, and see if we can't begin to correlate that, and if we can't use that to innovate how technologies adjust, and thinking about battlefield conditions, what happens with situationally induced disabilities such as hearing loss, sight loss, poor vision in certain situations. So thinking about how do all of those things work. So we've been doing this for quite some time, and we've looked at everything from popcorn machines to Facebook and Instagram to surgical devices. It's quite a leap, and so we're very excited about our user experience lab. A key thing that we also spend a lot of time on is our biomechanics innovation research for disability lab. The picture in the upper left is a project we completed last year with Utah State University. We know that people with significant disabilities or complex impairments cannot always charge their powered wheelchairs. And so together we developed a kind of like when you throw your phone down now to charge it with inductive charging, we now have the ability to drive your wheelchair onto a pad and charge your powered mobility device. We're also very, very interested in low-resourced countries. For example, right now I'm working with a physician out of Washington University in St. Louis with the Rohingya refugee camps, looking at solar-powered 3D printing to make simple rehab devices, all the way to how do you teach people with very little literacy to create in the field out of PVC pipe, for example, rehab technologies and rehab devices that can help facilitate these folks who have had no medical care whatsoever. So that's something we're working on really hard. We also are looking at things like the use of haptics. You know, we all know that patients with complex disabilities also have complex musculoskeletal systems, and we're trying to do seating positioning and all of those types of things. We need to palpate. We also need measurements. So out of our clinic, we worked with the International Standards Group. We developed clinical guidelines for defining measurement terms for systems for wheelchair seating and mobility, and seating and positioning in particular. We're now working on a project thinking about haptics, some way that we can use palpation in order to get good solid measurements so we can custom design complex seating systems and drive controls. We also are working, I have 6 students and between a couple undergrads all the way through a PhD student working on our social assistive robot. We have chosen to work first with young children with complex cerebral palsy. Our goal is to transition this into seniors' use for social isolation and rehab at home. But in the meantime, we are doing facial recognition of people whose faces don't necessarily react in the same way yours and mine does. We are looking at rehab as something that is a really complex process, and it doesn't happen in the clinic. The clinic is brilliant, it does wonderful things, but people go home. And our goal is to continue that rehabilitation at home and get those tens of thousands of repetitions in that these folks need in order to either repair the brain or improve their motor functioning. In addition, we are working on our neurocognitive technology for aging lab. This is kind of a fun space where we are looking at a number of newer technologies in order to facilitate aging in place or for people with disabilities to be safe in whatever environment they're in. And I'm going to talk just briefly about a project we're doing right now with Anthem Memory Care Benchmark. It was funded by Qualcomm through the Consumer Technology Association, some of my partners in crime, and basically looking at falls. In particular, we're starting with the toughest population, seniors with dementia, and recognizing what happens to them when they fall. Standard of care is you check on your patient every 30 minutes. But if you fall a second after that 30-minute clock starts, you're going to be there for a while and bad things can happen. We also know that 80% of these fall technologies are left on the bedside table. So we've come up with a wearable device, particularly for folks with dementia, that goes on the small of the back, and it can be worn and hopefully forgotten about. The idea is that should the individual fall, this data will go to a mobile device, and this mobile device will not immediately in real time contact the care provider, but more importantly, to begin to triage what's happened to this person so that we know how they fell and what happened when they fell. And so where we're starting, we started first, very simple, with just looking at the fact that as folks age, their gait changes and it's not always nice and upright. Gait can be very different. We then move through how do we simulate a number of types of falls, and this is just at half speed. So you can see that lots of things happen. What really matters is not only how you fall, how hard you fall, but the surface you fall on and the impact that occurs and the damage that can also happen. So where are we at today? We've gotten in a really good place. We're able to very accurately detect 9 different types of falls, everything from falling forward out of a chair to falling on your side, backwards, forwards, etc. And we have a sensor. This is not the sensor, full industry disclosure not allowed at this point, but we have a very small sensor that we are now starting next week. We will be, COVID put us behind, we'll be moving into a memory care facility to test both the adhesives as well as our sensor, and the prototype is underway for that real-time communication. Clinicians don't understand things in the way that engineers do, and engineers don't understand things in the way that clinicians do. So we're doing a lot of translation to make sure that this data is important and relevant. Following that, we're looking at wearable patches for home use of fall detection. These physiologic sensors are also enabling us to do heart rate, respiratory rate, temperature, some other things like that. The goal of all of that, of course, is to really figure out what happened pre, during, and post an event and see if we can identify some of the things that are going on. We are looking, for those of you physicians in the room, you know the Romberg test started in 1857 and it hasn't been changed since. We'd like to develop a clinical tool to facilitate that assessment, that clinical assessment, as well as gait speed analysis, because we know that's a real indicator of mortality and morbidity. And so that is another space that we're moving into. We were just funded a week ago for Project SOAR, and I think this is also of great value. One of the things we've learned through COVID is that expecting seniors to go online for telehealth visits and or for signing up for a COVID vaccine has been frankly a complete disaster. And we've been working at the national level with both AARP, the Administration on Community Living, and others to figure out how we can deal with this. So we were just funded to create a pilot project here in Colorado, where we will be developing seniors-based training materials, and we will be doing community-based research where we will bring techie seniors into the fold. They will be trained on how to teach, not just how to use a tablet and how to teach their peers to use a tablet, but also all the accessibility features and also how to work through telehealth visits. And so we're hopeful that this will change a lot of the lives of the folks that are out there by themselves and very alone. Finally, a next project that we're just launching with the Barbara Davis Center. There are 77 million Americans with diabetes on the road every day driving. Sometimes that does not turn out so well if their glucose monitoring isn't being paid attention to. So we will be working with a couple of industry partners, an auto manufacturer as well as a glucose monitoring system manufacturer, to take advantage of auto capabilities to not only alert people that they have a problem with their blood sugar levels, but also to eventually, the goal is to safely get them off the highway before something bad happens. I know my time is short, so I'll go ahead and stop talking in just a sec, but I did want to say that what we are very interested in is next generation. Previous engineering students really did not have this skill set of understanding user-centered design when it comes to patients with complex disabilities or even just mild disabilities. And so our goal within the Department of Bioengineering is to really focus on teaching this next generation of engineers how to be really, really proficient and take a user-centered approach to everything they do around this space. So that is where we're at. And finally, a special thanks, of course, to my team. And I will stop.
Fantastic, Kathy. And I'll try it. I think, do we have one question? Can we do that?
Let's do questions. So now we have 3 more presenters, and we'll just run those the next 30 minutes and include questions within. So yeah, we have until 12:30 for a question for Dr. Bodine. If there are any, you can put them in the box, or even from our panelists.
I'll bring up one question. You're talking about a lot about 3D design. I think is a couple of terms for that. And are you using that in a way that, even if it's in civilian settings, sort of next to the OR or next to the whatever R, ER or ICU? Because that's kind of important to me. I think Dr. Mallory talked about that as downrange, having something that's simple to use. I think I caught some of that. A lot of great information, by the way. I was just taking notes down, collaborations, and including your work before. Is that something you do now, or you teach these new engineers that as well, or where is that at? Because that's relevant for the duty for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So were you asking about the solar 3D printer?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That came out. So there, as you know, the Rohingya refugee camp has so many people with very serious, they're either machete, knife, or bullet wounds. The vast majority of them at best got a splint, and most of them did not receive medical care. So they have healed with horrific fractures. They have healed with significant wounds, and there really isn't any rehab tech anywhere around. So that's what drove the passion behind really creating this. So our students have put together all the components so that we could literally build a solar powered 3D printer. We can have it built on site. We're also developing files that can go with, so that people can, as simply as possible, print what they need or adjust it as they need it. And we're doing all this, trying to do all of this, kind of the IKEA model where there's no language. We have culturally appropriate icons that are walking people through, how would you put this thing together? How would you build it? How would you use it? And then looking then on the patient side, how would that work as well?
That's exactly what they're looking for these more austere settings, is something
Yes.
that global health and military line up on several items, especially
with Africa. So I just want to say, Kathy and I have been on phone calls for the last 3 months, about 2 hours at a time, and I had no idea what she did, the full details. So this is a great chance to hear it. We've been doing the strategy planning for the campus. So thank you, Kathy.
Yes, thank you.
So I just want to make a quick note. Thank you for that presentation that I just bumped everyone 10 minutes and we'll go along and we'll do questions within your 10 minutes. So we'll jump now. Dean Dunn, if you want to introduce the next presentation.
Yeah, I want to introduce another one of our fantastic faculty in bioengineering, kind of Jennifer Wagner. And before turning it over, I want to acknowledge that beautiful building that Kathy kind of is sitting in front of. Jennifer was our prime mover kind of across the bioengineering department and our college and everything for getting kind of us into that facility, and has done an absolutely fantastic job. I'm sure she has, she has lots of scars to show for it. And I really appreciate, that her hard work in upping our game and getting these fantastic facilities up and running.
Well, thanks for that, Dean Dunn. I'm glad to see it in use now. And I'm excited to be here, so thanks everyone for showing up. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and what I do, and then do a rapid fire slideshow through my work and my stab at some quad charts. So let me know if you can't see these, but I'm going to just go ahead and get going here. And I think it's helpful for you to see my background to understand what I have to contribute. So I started as a radiographer and did over 1,600 clinical hours based out of Children's downtown. I rotated through Denver General, Skyridge, Swedish, Panorama Orthopedics. So I have some clinical experience under my belt. And then I went out to the School of Mines and got a general engineering degree. And you'll see that reflected in the variety of projects that I work on. I specialize in problem solving. So I don't specialize in a particular discipline, but rather taking a big picture systems approach to really any problem. So after graduating there, I went to industry for about 3 years and worked as a satellite systems engineer on a constellation of communication satellites for machine-to-machine communication. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I've been at the university now working on my PhD that I should finish up here in the fall, among my other professional duties, actually, in addition. I put my volunteer victim advocate service up here because I have extensive experience in training in trauma and crisis intervention. So I respond with law enforcement to crimes ranging from mass casualty events, homicides, assaults, lots of veteran suicides and overdoses. So that experience definitely is put to use. So I'm going to start chronologically and work through these projects. My first project was an image registration algorithm development to help researchers locate and map their electrodes in primate neurophysiology research. So I'm proficient in C++ in this ITK image registration toolkit that's very powerful, and my heart lies in medical imaging. So this was pretty successful, and basically it's an algorithm to deform this map to any subject volume using an intermediate statistical average of brain images. Next, I went to industry, and this is the program I worked on. What I was responsible for is shown there in the deliverables section, but basically I started from the first prototype integration all the way through the second production spacecraft. I was responsible for testing, development, execution, tracking, resolution, everything from programming fault protection sequences to operating the 3 actuators or interpreting the 5 different control sensors. So after I left industry, this was the first project I worked on here at the university. And it's a new endotracheal tube restraint system to help better secure the tube to prevent unplanned extubation. That's obviously a critical problem, So this company contracted us to develop and execute a series of protocols. We compiled the data, published a paper, presented at a couple conferences, and it turns out that their device is superior and provides protection at all the different force vectors that could be applied. This company has been very successful and has actually obtained 4 of the Air Force innovation contracts using our protocol and our data. So the next project I started is actually the subject of my thesis, and it's another medical imaging one. So children with pediatric pulmonary hypertension generally undergo cardiac catheterization. Due to the high risk, it can't be performed at a high frequency. So I'm working with easily routinely obtained echocardiography views to break down the shape of the ventricle. So the normal cross-sectional shape of a left ventricle is on the left here, and in severe pulmonary hypertension, it's on the right. So from that, I derive a shape distribution for all of these different shapes using a Fourier transform, and that is then used to estimate the likelihood of pediatric pulmonary hypertension. The ROC curve shows that it actually performs pretty well using only one of the shape components here. So right now I'm also working on estimating non-invasive hemodynamics using multivariate models of these shape distributions. And this is being done with the Heart Institute over at Children's. Next, some medical image processing, again, integrating some 3D printing into various clinical workflows. All of these are actual patient cases that I've worked on with the fetal surgical team. So I routinely produce surgical aids for them. The adult spine team, all model complex cases. We got a grant to look at the effectiveness of using surgical models in planning scoliosis surgery. That's through Children's as well. And then some device sizing and surgical planning in the cardiovascular space. So this is some ongoing work that I do. One of the derivatives from that are a series of medical training systems that I develop and produce and supply routinely for companies as well as training programs. So the one in the upper right-hand corner is a neurosurgical trainer where this little brainstem superstructure, we can affix various pathologies. And then the materials are relatively similar to native tissues. And we've published a paper looking at how this training affects participants' skills. So we also developed on the top middle picture here is one of our skills tests that we use to assess the efficacy of our anatomical training routines. We did the same thing for a bronchial training system and also an upper airway, upper endoscopic system. So by now I have a pretty decent library of surgical training and skills assessment systems. And every year we put on some courses with them. We sent the skull one down to AANS and got a bunch of data and wrote that up. That was pretty interesting. And we filed a patent on it. Okay, now some devices. So this device here is now actually on the market by Stryker. It was acquired. But my role in this project was the initial engineer who worked with the surgeon on the requirement specifications, as well as the initial patent filing and prototype. So this is my work here, the friction calculations and some of the original CAD models and drawings for this system that is now commercially available. And Tarot Tracker, so this is a university spinoff company. And again, I was involved in requirements development and then working with the contract manufacturer to ensure that we could meet the system requirements, putting together some COMERB data and doing some V&V work with the contract manufacturer. So this has been another successful project. It's currently in clinical trials with a couple doctors and Dr. Shondas here on campus. And finally, I'll talk about another industry project. So I do a lot of work with industry here. This was an interesting one. Medtronic and Covidien asked us to assess some reprocessed devices. So not sure if you're aware, but companies will put recycling bins in operating rooms and collect devices that were designed for single use and reprocess them, slap their logo on there, and then go and sell them. So we looked at those reprocessed devices. We hypothesized that the intricate design features such as overmolds would harbor organic material. So we blasted the goop with some x-rays. That's this chart here on the right, and you can see our carbon, oxygen, sodium, sulfur, and then the silicon and titanium are material properties of the device itself, but they are indeed covered in organic material. So this has been successfully marketed by Medtronic, and as I understand it, is having quite a large impact. Happy to talk about that more. So that is all I'm gonna blast you with there, and I'll take some questions if anyone has any.
Great.
So hi,
Thank you.
everyone. This is Amber from 59th. Really interesting work. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the shape imaging and if there is any applications maybe for looking at the shape of the brain for cerebral perfusion, and also maybe as an indicator of dehydration. And then the second kind of just interest, I don't know, I mean, I'm obviously not an engineer, I'm a toxicologist, but just thinking about if that shape imaging could be applicable to other conditions besides just the heart there. And then for the skills test on your training application, has that been reassessed for sustainment? So if you've used it for initial training, is there been a post assessment to see how well they retain that training using her platform? Over.
So we haven't yet, but we have been acquiring data every year at our neuro course. I don't think we've analyzed it yet, but I think that's a great question to ask, and I'll see if I can get a hold of the data. Right now, it's just an internal course, so our N is so low, we're having a hard time powering it. So our longest time point is just over a 2-day period. But I think I would love to look at that. And to the shape imaging, yeah, I believe that there are many different applications for this because the shape is a reflection of the pressure and volume. So I think we could look at fluid status. The brain, it gets a little tricky with getting the ultrasound through the skull. Obviously, if they have, a skull patch removed for swelling, then game on. I suppose you could, assuming that the limits of resolution would allow for a high enough sampling frequency of the shape. But yes, I've been just dying to carry that research forward and also deploy it using machine vision and more of a real-time aspect, because that speckle tracking is available in a semi-real-time mode by some commercial vendors.
Thank you.
Jennifer,
I think, go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Sean Keenan. One thing that struck me is that there's a huge push towards simulation for training. And we do not have a good upper airway model to practice advanced airways. And that is one of those things that is frustrating for educators, and it's been an identified gap. And so I know there's a huge funding area, and they tend to favor simulation over all other kinds of education and training. And then the second part of that is just the skill sustainment. I know Colonel Weissel also hit on that, but right now we're standardizing the initial training, but truly when it looks at psychomotor skills and whatnot, just seeing what the, for each individual way and the best way to train those. Over.
Yeah, I have an upper airway model. I'd be happy to make you one. So yeah, if any of those models look interesting, we can certainly put together some and get to work.
I know a few people who might be interested.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out.
And Dean, Don, and team, actually, I think we've had a few conversations offline here. I think what we'll do is we'll sort of summarize some of those and start getting those emails out with even Colonel Weissel as well. And I think there's a lot of conversations we're going on in the background. So this is exactly what we wanted.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'm Jennifer, thank you. Kind of very well done. I'm going to kind of hand the baton to Professor Brad Smith. No, I'm off.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand the baton to Professor Richard Weir, who's going to talk about biomechatronics development and his fantastic work.
I think Colonel Weissel's trying to comment. I don't know if one of the IT folks have him on mute. We may not have time. He can probably circle back later. But
Sounds good. I'll work on that.
Okay, thanks.
It's all yours, Richard.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this and to be able to share some of what we do in the Biomechatronics Development Laboratory. And basically, our goal, or everything we do in our lab, is aimed at the ultimate vision of developing better upper limb prosthetic systems for folks with upper limb loss. But under that umbrella, a lot of the technologies we develop have broader application. I'm from Ireland originally, Trinity College in Dublin, electrical engineering, came to Northwestern University and did my PhD in biomedical engineering there, and then did 20 years at the Rehabilitation Institute in Chicago before coming to Colorado to be a part of the newly formed bioengineering department here. So our lab has been involved in upper limb prosthetics in one way, shape, or form for quite a while. And we've been involved since all the recent conflicts and been involved in the development of the major limb systems that have come out of the initiatives that came out of those conflicts, like the DARPA Revolutionizing Prosthetics projects. We developed both the limb systems for DECA, or consulted with DECA on their hand. We also built many of the prototype arm systems that were finally developed for the Applied Physics Laboratory project under the RP initiative, the Revolutionizing Prosthetics initiative. We've also developed and translated an implantable myoelectric sensor that is the idea is to inject this thing into residual muscle, and then it telemeters the muscle signal out of the body to external hardware that's used to decode signals from a cloud of implants and control a prosthetic hand. And we did this with a bunch of collaborators, including the Mann Foundation, Illinois Institute of Technology. And most recently, since coming to, so these were this IMES implantable sensor, and the Revolutionizing Prosthetics work was done in Chicago, but since coming to Colorado, we've managed to get ourselves a 3D metal printer, direct laser metal sintering machine. And from our early experience developing the limb systems for DARPA, we realized the power and the value of 3D CAD and additive manufacture. And so I also have an appointment with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm a research career scientist with them. And so through the VA, they actually got us a direct laser metal sintering machine. And we've been developing and working with that for many years to figure out the best way to make things. So our ultimate vision has always been to create this sort of bionic limb that we could control with a neural interface, maybe from a peripheral nerve interface. But the problem turns out to be a little bit tougher than originally thought. And so we have this whole interface, human machine interface side that we have to lift signals off the human with. Then we have to run it through a bunch of signal decode methods. And then we have to drive some multi-degree of freedom arm system. And then it turns out to do proper dexterous manipulation, we actually have to sense sensory feedback and feed that back into the human using whatever techniques we can. So our flavor is to use an optogenetic neural interface. So we've been developing a lot of work in that world, as well as robust and solid fingers that we can use for sensing. Our ultimate vision is to use an osseointegrated interface with some sort of muscle surgery, like targeted muscle reinnervation, that was originally developed by Todd Kiken and Greg Demanian at RIC, or the regenerative peripheral nerve interfaces that were developed by Paul Sedriner at Michigan, along with our implantable sensors that would give us our forward path. We've been funded through VA, NIH, as well as CDMRP and DARPA DoD. So, like I said, yeah, we do 3D metal printing, we do 3D plastic printing. That's kind of our toolkit. You know, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So we go and we print everything pretty much. And so we've been, we have this very good printing machine for metal, and we have this we have a very good variable durometer plastic printer as well. Like I said, we do everything in this. We print assembled gears. These gears are printed as one piece, and then we break them and roll them. We print hollow parts. We're doing surface finishes on parts so that we could promote boning growth. This is a mold that we printed for an optogenetic nerve cuff, so that we could mold up cuffs with sufficient feature size to cuff nerves. We print components for this is a motorized finger that we're working on. So this is our sort of what we go to. The other point is, yeah, we make all this stuff, but we want to make our stuff also, yeah, the goal has been this, you know, bionic limb with the neural interface, but that's kind of a long way away. So in the meantime, we still want to make an impact in the field. We work with clinicians. When we spun out a bunch of our technologies to a company, we have a company that we started ourselves called Point Designs that sells purely mechanical fingers to folks with limb loss, finger loss. We've translated some of our control algorithms to another small business. We're also working with this company, Robotic Materials, and Jacob Siegel, Dr. Jacob Siegel up at Boulder, to make robust fingertip sensors that actually has us involved with all the leading teams who are doing the neural interface, implanted neural interface work. We are acutely aware of wearable, robust, durable, weatherproof coming out of the DARPA initiative, also because the stuff we make for folks, they tend to beat up. And so our first commercial mechanical prosthetic system is mechanical, and it's out of printed titanium. And this is a typical fitting for someone riding a bike. The company has, like, we have these are different prosthetic options, and these are different products. These are all made out of 3D printed titanium. The fingertip sensors, we are, like I said, we think sensing and feedback turns out to be really important. And we need it to do dexterous manipulation, but more importantly, it also looks like people will embody their prosthesis if we give them back a sense of touch in the correct way. It also helps with the elimination of phantom limb pain. So this is why we tend to be into this field. We've recently got into so whilst we have, like, I was kind of preface, we've been doing this very sensible stuff too, but we also have the crazy stuff. And so one of our ideas here is to use harvest blood sugar, to harvest the glucose out of blood pass it through a membrane in a fuel cell to create electricity. So to develop a fully implantable power source that we could use to power implanted or implantable materials and things like pacemaker or deep brain stimulators or baclofen pumps or something. But we believe, because we have a secret sauce in this particular membrane, we believe we can pull electricity out of flowing blood glucose across this membrane. So this is just a project that we've just started up. We've been working in this area of optogenetics, which we believe allows us to modulate nerves at the axon level. This is a node of Ranvier here, and this is us measuring an action potential traveling down at the nodes of Ranvier. I don't know if you can see the flash there, but the flash up here, that is an action potential traveling down at the node of Ranvier in a nerve. So if we can do it at that level, we can do this, have a bidirectional nerve interface that allows us to use it for control. We've been working in cuffs to figure out how to hold stuff against the nerve. We do a lot of surgery. Since you're interested, memory retention, there's a bunch of neuromodulation work that says you can maybe help with retention if you hit people at the correct point in their sleep. So this was a thought. Yes, we can do optogenetic modulation of the pancreas here, because we were funded to do a bunch of sciatic, not a vagus nerve from the SPARC project, vagus nerve interface work. So we were also able to modulate heart rate using optogenetic approaches as well. And this is all coming out of a project that we recently got through NINDS. This is a big project with a bunch of collaborators here on this campus and up at Boulder. Julia Gopinath, Emily Gibson, Victor Bright, Robert McLeod, John Caldwell, Diego Restrepo are all partners on this project that we have to develop this sort of optogenetic system to do bidirectional neuromodulation. Yes, we've been aware and involved since all these prosthetic, we've been doing limb development because of all the wars that have been going on. And we were involved with the DECA arm, like I said, DARPA arm. Our IMEs has been finally in humans, and we've been able to translate. This has recently been bought by OSER. So this is kind of where we hope to go. So I think we've done a lot of stuff, but I think neuromodulation is an interesting way. Our approach with optogenetics means we can use viral vectors to express the optical proteins and then use light to interrogate the nerves. I'm going to stop there. I've got a bunch of folks here. So I wanted to, yeah, so lots of collaborators and lab members. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We are going to move on to the next presenter, our last presenter. And I know, I think Dr. Smith, you said yours is about 8 minutes. So if the audience members can hang on another 8 minutes, it would be great to see his presentation, then we can come back to questions. So thank you so much.
It's all yours, Brad. Another one of our great bioengineering professors, Brad Smith. Got it. Cool. Sorry about that. My screen share hid the mute button. So let me just organize here slightly. So this should actually be pretty quick. I've pared down a huge body of work to just the part that I think you all will find interesting. So my training is bioengineering, actually microfluidics and computational methods with an expert in lung surfactant, and then got into in vivo models of lung injury, and now I'm here. And my research group really focuses on pathogenesis and treatment of lung injury. So it's clinical guys. This is known as acute respiratory distress syndrome. It's a hypoxemic respiratory failure caused by trauma,
blast or inhalation injuries, that's kind of relevant to this group, sepsis, and as everyone's known this year, COVID-19. So I think up until February of last year, nobody really knew what I did or cared, and all of a sudden everyone's interested in my work. So it's something I wish hadn't happened. So during lung injury, you get a flood of fluid into the lung, which you can kind of see up here in these micrographs as this purplish fluid. It has high surface tension. This causes the lung to collapse. The alveoli, the little sites of gas exchange, collapse down. And because of this, you need mechanical ventilation to be able to push enough gas into the lung to stay alive. In the case of these lung injury models, it's because of the high surface tension and alveolar collapse. But this could also be due to neurologic issues where the patient actually can't control their breathing to instigate the breaths. So either way, when you're on the ventilator, a major concern is ventilator-induced lung injury. These mechanical ventilators are a double-edged sword where it's necessary to maintain life, but they can also cause ventilator-induced lung injury, which itself is a serious condition. And this mainly occurs because the ventilator settings are not perfectly well matched to the patient. So this is kind of an application of personalized medicine gone wrong. And I think one thing that really highlights the importance of ventilation in ARDS is the drop in mortality. In the 1970s, ARDS mortality was somewhere around 90%. And that's because they took the approach of just blasting a ton of air into the lungs, trying to meet oxygenation targets. And since then, we've taken a different approach where we're trying to protect the lung from the ventilator. And that has been one of the key factors in reducing ARDS mortality to about 40%. And I don't have any COVID year statistics, but in a normal year, that 40% mortality is about 40,000 deaths in the United States. So it's a big problem even in non-pandemic years. So the problem is that it's not super easy to figure out the safest and most effective ventilator settings, even under ideal conditions, in a well-staffed, high-end medical intensive care unit. And this is because the ventilation requirements are different for each patient. ARDS comes from all of these different factors, causative factors. And even in the same patient, the ventilation requirements and best ventilation settings are going to change over time as the condition of the patient either gets worse or they recover. So I see this as a Goldilocks problem where we're trying to find the thing that's just right. We need enough pressure to keep the lungs open and prevent collapse. But at the same time, we don't want to put too much pressure in there, overinflate them and overstretch the tissue to cause damage. And kind of similarly, we need enough minute ventilation getting into these lungs to provide gas exchange, but we also need to balance that against causing stress to the tissue. And these just pictures of pig lungs here on the right-hand side really, I think, make a strong case for the importance of lung protective ventilation. These are both from a pig sepsis model, and the upper panel is an optimally lung protective ventilation. Those lungs are happy, pink, good looking lungs. Pig was pretty healthy at the end of the experiment. And by contrast, this lower panel was the current clinical standard of care. And you don't have to be an expert in lung physiology to think that those don't look very good. So what we've been working on is this concept of trying to identify optimally lung protective ventilation. And the concept is that we continually assess lung mechanics just from data that's already coming into the ventilator. We use subject-specific computer models, and we make those subject-specific by fitting them to the ongoing measurements of lung mechanics. And then we use the models to predict and apply what we would define as optimally lung protective ventilation. So basically the models are a little in silico laboratory where we can try a bunch of different ventilation settings, pick the one that looks the best, and then apply. And this is a continuous cycle of monitoring and refinement. Just on the right side here, this is an example from the mouse lab where we measured the driving pressure. So this is the amount of pressure required to push in a breath over a range of positive and expiratory pressures. So this is the pressure at the end of the breath. And when we compare our predictive models to the measured data, we see excellent agreement here. And what I think is interesting about both of these results is that the end expiratory pressure that minimizes this injurious driving pressure is different for our healthy or lung injured mice. So you might be watching this and say, that sounds like a fun science project, but how does this benefit the military? And I think it actually hits quite a few of the targets that we were discussing earlier. My first thought is that this would be important during prolonged field care. If you have someone who is less highly trained in ventilator management, trying to take care of a colleague away from a established medical facility, unloading the burden of ventilator management could be highly beneficial to survival, short and long-term outcomes. And I could also see this freeing up personnel who would, instead of managing a ventilator, be free to pursue mission objectives. I also envision applications in transport, either in shorter distances or longer distances, where you have ventilated patients who we are trying to keep healthy in travel. And the COVID-19 pandemic has really brought the importance of this sort of technology kind of into my focus from work we were doing this spring. And I could see these kind of closed loop ventilators being relevant in large respiratory pandemics, bioterrorism, these mass casualty events, mainly by extending the care capacity of a limited supply of personnel. So we were trying to work up some improvised ventilators this spring, and when I was bouncing these ideas off my clinical colleagues in the medical intensive care unit, what they came back to me was, that's great, but we don't have any excess staff to run these additional ventilators. So I think that removing some work from ventilator management could have some real benefits there. And as I was listening to the slides earlier, I added this unmanned evacuation, because if you're evacuating someone who's on a ventilator without having someone there to manage the ventilator, you're going to need a way to control that thing. So this is right now funded by an NHR01, and I just wanted to run through what we're doing now so you could get an idea of what we're doing to further this technology. We've got some stuff going in the mouse lab where we're working up different patient-specific predictive computer models, trying to find the one that runs most efficiently and has the best predictions of structure and function. We're also trying to determine targets for ventilation. Kind of on the surface, it might seem that you could look at a ventilator and be like, oh, those settings are terrible. You're causing ventilator-induced lung injury. But that's not the case. There's no well-accepted readout on the ventilator indicating that ventilation is unsafe. So we're trying to establish rigorously some quantitative measures of ventilation safety that we can use as targets for optimization. So at the same time as we're doing this mouse work, we're also going to be pulling in data from the medical intensive care unit, these continuous streams of ventilator data. I think we expect a total of 8 or 10 terabytes of pressure and volume. And from this big data, we're going to also be working on this model development and these VILI cost functions that define ventilation safety. And our final step in this grant is going to be to test these closed loop approaches in mice. And in the future, I'd like to move this into large animals, and then in future studies beyond that, into the clinic. So just very quickly, another area that might be of interest is a treatment we've been working up with Ken and Eva of cerium oxide nanoparticles that are conjugated to a microRNA. And this is a treatment for acute lung injury that right now we're delivering intratracheally in mice and a couple of different injury models. And we've seen some really exciting results with inflammation being reduced, the alveolo-capillary barrier being protected, lung function being restored, and in the long term, a reduction of fibrosis readouts in these mice. And so I just got to throw this out there in case there's interest, particularly if it's a group that has experience with larger animal models, because we're looking to move this into pigs. We think that's the next step. And that's not an area of our expertise. So with that, I'm just going to drop this slide up here in case anyone's looking for someone to collaborate with on lung structure, lung function, and mechanical ventilation experiments in the lab. Please reach out to me, and happy to take any questions now.
I'm going to jump in, Brad. I want to say that Brad and I talked before with Sarah, and we have a big model, as you know, and we want to volunteer. We've actually done some stuff with lung injury. I've got a list of collaborations driving out of this meeting, but so Brad, we're going to sync back up on that. And then we got you. We're with you for that, for the military, but other aspects we're doing with lung injury, with Eric Schmidt, some pulmonology, and others as well.
Yeah, we've got an Eric Schmidt project going too, looking at the Heifer days.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
He's phenomenal. Okay, I'll step back. Well, I got you, Brad. We'll follow up with you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. And that was a wonderful presentation. I just want to open it up quickly for questions for Dr. Smith or Dr. Weir. And then we are going to have that meeting breakout room. So thank you to those two last presenters, and any questions for them. And it looks like many audience members were able to stay on. So don't worry, tons of people still listening here. Thanks.
Hey, Dr. Babarda, you might want to consider Dr. Baczynski out of the ISR. He would have a very strong interest in that in his acute lung injury models as well, in porcine models. So that might create some neat collaboration there that usually goes untapped. So, and then I was very, very impressed with the opticogenetic kind of concept of sensory reinnervation of prosthetics. I mean, brilliant. Would love to see, we won the AFIRM 3 grant down here, and are very, very much into the nerve regeneration from a surgical standpoint, immediate nerve rehabilitation, due to the massive amount of morbidity that goes along with peripheral nerve injury. So we'd love to see an independent presentation on that. We have quite a collection of surgeons that would be very keen on collaborating. So I would love to have additional talks on that subject. Over.
This is just General Flaherty, and I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I just want to say, wow, I had no idea of the amazing work that you all were doing. Dean Dunn, thank you for a great overview of the work the College of Engineering is doing. Truly extraordinary. And then thank you, Dr. Bodine, Jennifer Wagner, Jennifer Weir, and Dr. Smith for impressive work that you're doing. So innovative, but I also think of all the vast potential applications for injured warriors and our warriors medic. And as Dr. Keenan said, the potential simulation models, and as a clinician and a commander in Afghanistan caring for triple amputees, amazing work on the prosthetics. So I just think about the people I cared for and the work that you're doing that can make a difference. And then Dr. Smith, the prolonged field care, unmanned ventilators. I mean, all the work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say it's fantastic work. This is some great conversation. This is Kathy and I have been on several phone calls to the campus trying to, how do we do value add collaborations across campus, across specialties? And Dean Dunn and I have been talking about specifically with this, and this is exactly what we're looking for. Real opportunities, real sponsors who want to fund this, real collaborations cutting from clinical to engineering. And then I've got a list of ones I'm going to start connecting right after this with the presenters. This is just one of a few more meetings that we're going to have together, at least, for sure. Great work.
Thank you all. And we do have 2 questions from the audience, and I'd like to take those too. And then we will jump into that meeting again if you have time. So from Dr. Thomas Greeny, interested in the discussion with Dr. Brad Smith. And so I will turn that information over to you, Dr. Smith, from Dr. Greeny. I don't think there's a question there. And then from Adam Stevens, for Dr. Smith, what stage of sleep and area of the brain is targeted for memory retention studies?
Oh, I'm not sure how to answer that one. We don't really focus too much on sleep for memory retention. Might have that been for Dr. Weir, because you had mentioned some things about memory retention. I see a nod.
Yeah, there's some evidence to suggest that you can do transcranial direct current stim right after or before REM sleep for memory consolidation. And so all transcranial direct current stimulation could also be used to enhance learning. There's some research that if you do this whilst you are learning, you have better retention as well. So.
Cool.
Thank
And
you.
I guess, yep. And to get to Thomas's comment, I think we might have briefly corresponded about this in the spring, but that time is such a mess in my mind. And happy to talk more about this if you want to get in touch. And I should also mention that Vic and I ventilated a couple of pigs with some weird ventilator together back in the spring. So we do have kind of an existing collaboration in that regard.
And bound by swine. That's right.
And I would just like to say thank you everyone for organizing this. This has turned out to be an exceptional event. It's super well organized, like great group of different diverse people here. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this. So thank you for organizing.
Yeah, thank you everyone. It was great to be involved. So.
And I'm going to pass it over to Vic Babarda right now. And then we will, if you have time, you can hop over into the meeting link, but I'll let Dr. Babarda say the last words here.
Great, thanks. And again, Dean Dunn, if you want to capture a few words at the end as well, but just want to thank everybody, definitely Dean Dunn for working on this, and then Dr. Flagg and Diane for actually deciding that we should do this together at a high level. I mean, it's just exactly what we've been asking to do, and a really good opportunity for real collaboration with real ideas, with real funding opportunities. Specifically, I want to thank the DoD speakers. These are the key experts. So Dr. Flaherty, who's our deputy director, but just an expert, but also Dr. Mallory, Colonel Weissel, and Dr. Retired Colonel Keenan. These are the experts in the community. I'm feeling from these side conversations, we might have a field trip down to Texas with some engineers and vice versa once COVID kind of clears up a little bit. And so that's definitely, I think, part of our offline conversations. But I'm glad we had this. I'm looking forward to the next one as well.
I'll just add to that. I'm just thrilled kind of with I think the dynamic kind of response and energy kind of the discussion, and seeing some of the connections that are already happening. And, you know, you don't know this, but I already have, I think, a couple of emails on the side too of folks saying, I want to get in touch with so-and-so. So I think kind of as Dr. Babarda said, I think this is exactly kind of what we had hoped would happen. And I think it's kind of the first of, you know, a growing effort to kind of bring people together to kind of make a big impact kind of with their work, and putting the clinicians kind of together with our engineers, looking at kind of possible solutions for, you know, kind of combat environments and so forth. There's so many opportunities there. And I'm just thankful for kind of the DoD folks for kind of sharing your expertise with us, and sharing kind of your kind of insight kind of to the folks in the Combat Center. Thank you so much for kind of stimulating this and kind of getting us kind of moving. And to my kind of colleagues in my college, I'm kind of really grateful. And it's fun for me to get to hear what my folks are doing too. And, you know, even 15 minutes or so is sort of a level of depth that I just don't get as often as I would like to. And then Dr. Flagg, kind of Diane, and so thank you so much for all of your efforts and all of the folks for putting this together. Very, very well done.
Thank you. And we will sign off now. This recording will be available early next week, and we'll get it out, and we'll have it on websites and whatnot. Some people can't make the meeting, but if you can pop in, we'll probably run it just to 1:30, so 10 minutes in those two groups. And we'll leave this open so people can see that link. Thank you so much to everybody.
Bye.
Hey, Dan, where are those links to go to the groups?
They're in the chat, is it?
Hey, everybody. Nope, I'm echoing.
You're muted. So what's the deal here? We have to go, is there a link? This puts us into one or other of the places.
Yeah,
Here.
you're good. Down in the breakout room, it could be down at the bottom of your screen.
I got it.
Yep.
Got it.
So if you're in this room right now, pick a group 1 or 2.
Where do you pick a
And that
group?
should be down below in your breakout rooms at the bottom of the screen. All right. We're almost all done. Dean Dunn, do you see where you can pick a group? I think picking group 2 would be you. Oh, you're muted.
I think I'm in group 2. No?
I'm gonna assign you to 2. There you go. And then the rest of you, I'll just do 2 as well. And then you can switch over if you'd like.